I'm here, Bryan Rudnick, in the headquarters today with one of the most special guests I've had to date. We're hitting all sorts of milestones. I'm bringing on Congressman Jack Bergman. And Congressman Jack Bergman is not a name you necessarily know. You may never have heard of him, even though he did at one point get consideration to be Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. But what's more important about General Bergman, somebody I've grown to admire over, I think, the last 5 or so years, is that he's the highest ranking combat veteran we have in Congress. He is representing the 1st Congressional District of Michigan, which we will talk about on today's episode. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee, the House Budget Committee, and the Veterans Affairs Committee. He entered Congress in January of 2017. He was a small business owner and a commercial airline pilot for 22 years, and he has served in our military for over 40 years before retiring. He was in the Marine Corps. He was in Vietnam. He flew CH-46 helicopters. He's been in combat. He was a flight instructor at Whittingfield in Florida. In 2005, he assumed command of Marine Forces Reserve Marine Forces North in New Orleans. He retired from the Marine Corps in 2009 at the rank of Lieutenant General. That's 3 shiny stars on his shoulders, which means that he's the real deal. He's a man that when he speaks, you should respect and you should listen to. You should be thankful that we have such great and patriotic people in our country who not only are willing to put on the uniform, but spend as much time as he has spent in uniform, protecting us, allowing us to sleep at night, allowing us to be safe. So he's got his wife, Cindy, and they live in Watersmeet, Michigan since the early 90s. And another impressive thing about him is that he's got 10 grandchildren. So instead of relaxing at home after he spent over 40 years serving our country in and out of combat, where he's been in business, where he's flown all these planes and helicopters and and just done so much, he is still continuing to serve our country. So he is on Rally for the Republic as we meet certain milestones, having our first member of Congress to be interviewed today, having our first flag officer, our first Marine, and our first resident of the state of Michigan. And so I'm grateful that General Bergman is here to share his insights with us today.
This is a battle cry for the American way of life and a relentless pursuit of truth and justice. It comes from a voice with unmatched experience and unyielding resolve. Join us as we dissect current events and tip the scales in your favor. This is Rally for the Republic with your host, Bryan Rudnick.
This is Bryan Rudnick, host of Rally for the Republic, here with our very special guest, General Jack Bergman of Michigan's 1st Congressional District. Welcome, General Bergman.
Hey, great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity, Ron.
Thank you for joining us. As I've mentioned before, you are the first member of Congress to join us, the first flag officer, the first Marine, and I think the first resident of Michigan. So thank you for hitting all those milestones with us.
Well, that's a lot of firsts. And since I represent Michigan's first, it just makes sense.
So could you tell the Rally for the Republic listeners where you are in Michigan's first?
Yeah, right now
and where the district's located.
Okay. Well, I am blessed to represent half, to be exact, 48.1% of the land mass of Michigan in my district. I represent all of the Upper Peninsula, which is where I live, way in the western end of the UP. And then as you cross the Mackinac Bridge and go down, a couple hours south of the bridge, we in Michigan, because it looks like a hand, we say knuckles north. So I have that upper third of lower Michigan, and it's a beautiful state, whether it's, winter, summer, fall. Spring's a little iffy, it's muddy, it's slushy, it's buggy, it's whatever. But right now I am in the southern part of the district below the bridge. And because it is, that season of campaign season and just constituent meetings like I'm always doing, we kind of every day is filled with numerous events. I'm meeting with my people and spending time with them and finding out what's going on in their lives.
Wonderful. So that actually dovetails into the next question I want to ask you is, what are the concerns you're hearing, the biggest concerns you're hearing from constituents?
Well, the biggest concerns I'm hearing today really haven't changed much over time, because we are a district where people are always looking to do, I guess, more with their lives. In other words, being able to raise a family, being able to have a job, or in a lot of cases, working 2 jobs to support their families. And this is not extravagant living up here. This is, in the words of one of my constituents a few years ago, he said, "We want 3 things from the federal government. Basically help us, enable us to educate our kids, and stay out of our pocketbooks as best as the federal government can. And number 3, leave us alone." So the point is, the people in my district are pretty much, they're hardworking, God-fearing, get up, go to get involved in the community events. And when they're not doing that, they're taking their kids hunting and fishing and anything but sitting on a flat screen inside a room in the beautiful weather that we have.
So,
but by the way, let me add one thing to that, because you asked me the question of what was on their minds. All of what I just said means an economy that allows for the creation of jobs and people to maintain a lifestyle that can afford their lifestyle without support. So in other words, self-sufficiency. But the other thing that is on their minds is security, because they've been concerned about I'm not going to say open, I'll just say the porous southern border, especially for the last 4 years, because of the fact that they view it as a security issue. Because we know from the numbers are fairly current. There's people from like 63 different countries coming in through the southern border. And guess what? Not all of them are good guys. So our citizens want a safe and secure country, and that means having a border that has entry points, not a porous border that people just come across and disappear into our interior.
So, General Bergman, you've given so much to our country. I've seen your resume. If I recall, you spent over 40 years in uniform.
That is correct.
Flying. You've been in Vietnam. You've served in various capacities throughout our military. Would you tell the listeners a little bit about your background before you joined
the
United States Congress?
Yeah, sure. I graduated college in 1969, right at the height of the Vietnam War. Became a Marine second lieutenant, went through flight training, did fly helicopters in Vietnam, and came back, spent a few years on active duty, 3 to be exact, and then decided to leave active duty and get involved in the business world. But I stayed in the reserves. So that business world involved medical equipment and operating room technologies at that point. And then I became an airline pilot, all the while doing that, but I stayed in the reserves. So fast forward, I became a general officer in 1998. That was not part of a plan. It just happened. 9/11 happened, and I was back on active duty until 2009. So over a 40-year time frame, I had 7 years active duty front end, 7 years active duty back end, and a whole bunch of reserve and active time in little bits and pieces in the middle. But I'm a businessman, an airline pilot, and probably the most thing I'm proud of is we got 10 grandkids, so I'm a proud grandfather.
So is that what caused you to want to serve in Congress?
It did, because we are blessed to have the country we have, because my parents, other cases, people's grandparents stepped up when the country needed them back in the late 1930s and especially through the first half of the 1940s. And I believed and still believe that to serve your country in some form or capacity is honorable. It's the right thing to do. But most importantly, it gives each of us who choose to do that a sense of self-confidence and a feeling that, yes, we were part of something that through our sacrifice and our service, we made things better for others. So I'm still trying to set an example for my grandkids, who we have a couple now who are already out of college, and I've got one grandson who's halfway through West Point. But they're all moving along, but I'm still trying to set the example for them that if you get involved, be a kind person, be a good person, and go out and get things done. you will smile every day about life. Even though there's a few hiccups, there's always going to be. So that was my motivation on the front end when this became an open seat in Michigan's 1st District in the 2016 election. I told my wife, hey, you know, if I put my hat in the ring, will you support me? And she goes, go ahead. Who's going to vote for you? Nobody knows you. So, but she stuck with me and we got elected, and here we are 8 years later.
And I see you're doing so well that you won the GOP primary recently with 80% of the vote.
I did.
So I guess the people like you must be delivering for your constituents.
We tend to talk a little and do a lot, and the people up here appreciate that. They're sick of hearing about what people are going to do tomorrow, as opposed to what we've accomplished and what we're trying to do today to build on it. The people up here, if I meet 10 people today, I would suggest to you between 8 and 9 of them will come up and shake my hand, thank me, maybe share a story about what's going on in their lives. And there's going to be 1 or 2 who, shall we say, have a different view of life. And there's going to be a few catcalls. And I'm not plugging a company here, but I do some of my best retail politics in Costco in Traverse City, because I just walk around with a shopping cart, and I'm always getting my wife's honeydew list and grocery list. But people will engage me right there, and it's a great way to understand what's going on in other people's lives.
That's wonderful. I just want to let Rally for the Republic listeners know that you've told me before the interview that you're out and about meeting with your constituents today, which is why the internet connection may not be perfect. You didn't have time to go into a studio because, true to form, you're out there meeting with your constituents today.
That is correct.
So I think it's important.
That is correct. And one of the single projects that we have worked on since I got here that we're finally seeing really good advancement is getting the high-speed internet to the homes, so the people can work from home, so the kids can educate from home, all those things. Our district, because it's so rural and remote, and we saw that during COVID, how poor our internet capability was up here. So that's been a personal goal of mine, and the companies that are doing it up here are doing a great job, and we're getting it to everybody. Now, if you have listeners from Michigan who are deer hunters, I just want them to know that I cannot guarantee that we're going to get internet to deer camp, because that's kind of a whole different experience there. And most hunters don't want internet at deer camp.
Okay. So you're also on the House Armed Services Committee, and I'd love to get your perspective on a few topics there.
Okay.
Donald Trump gave a speech last week in North Carolina at some of his counter programming against Kamala. And I noticed he mentioned that we're on the precipice of World War III. How do you feel about that?
Well, I will say that, number one, any nation that appears weak to other nations always assumes additional risk that those potential adversary nations might try to take over because they view you're weak. I don't necessarily think we're on the verge of World War III, but we as the United States have to be prepared and accept the fact that if you think during World War II, we referred to the Axis powers. It was Germany, Japan, and Italy, okay, historical. Currently, that triangle is now a box, and the 4 corners of that box that affect our potential to have to respond militarily are China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So we have 4 bad actors with malicious intent who are just waiting to see if there is a way that they can interrupt and take down our way of life. So given my time in the military and, retiring at the 3-star level, and also probably more importantly right now on armed services, I am the subcommittee chairman on the Intel and Special Ops subcommittee. So I see a lot of things that are going on around the world with our special operators. I mean, last March, I was over in the Philippines for a few days and in Taiwan. A couple of months here, I'm going to head over to Finland to the border up there they have with Russia. So I stay very current in not only the readiness of our military, but also what's ongoing in small multilateral operations we have going with the likes of the countries I just mentioned. So we live in a dangerous world, and talk is cheap, but we have to show a strong readiness capability and a resolve that if somebody decides to do something bad to our people, we're going to respond. Make no bones about it. We will respond accordingly.
You are listening to Rally for the Republic with your host, Bryan Rudnick.
So there's been a lot of media coverage, pro and con, of the DEI policies, if you will, in the military and how they're impacting military readiness. I'd love to get your perspective on a few of them. Last week, Newsmax published an article that a nuclear policy expert appointed in the Department of Energy under Biden has co-authored an article entitled Queering Nuclear Weapons, which is part of their queer theory, and they want to use it as part of America's nuclear policies. I don't know if you're aware of that or not.
I heard about it. Again, I'm first and foremost, I'm a Marine, so that's my background. And in the military, we don't elect leaders. We select leaders after rigorous examination of their records, of personal experiences, people who've served, watch them over time. So we just don't randomly elect somebody or appoint somebody to a senior leadership position in the military if they don't show that they have the capabilities. That is not the same in the political world, where people get elected and people get appointed. And unfortunately, the wokeness, the DEI, basically the dismissal that a meritocracy is the right way to run any organization. Because if you don't qualify for the promotion by your performance, you shouldn't get it. And putting on my airline pilot hat, name me one criteria that any airline passenger has for who the pilot is on their airplane. And I guarantee you, when they're on board, they're going to want capability. They don't care whether the person is male or female, tall or short, black or white. They want a pilot who can fly the airplane, make decisions when things go bad, and get them there safely. So if I was in charge of the Department of Defense, there'd be a lot of resignations sitting on my desk.
Are you concerned, like Breitbart put out this article that the U.S. Navy might need to sideline 17 ships due to a lack of manpower? Is there a lot of accuracy to those kinds of reports?
The Navy has had some serious issues with its manning of its surface warfare ships mainly. And the Navy has not successfully, thoughtfully managed their manpower requirements and training requirements that takes, let's say in this case, if you're looking at whether it be officers or who will be in command of the ship or be in the engineering officer or the deck officer or whatever, but most especially also to their senior enlisted leadership, who are those career-long maintainers who understand how to make the ship run. The Navy is behind. They're way behind in that, and you don't create those skills and capabilities overnight. So the Navy has some catching up to do. So I don't disagree with that comment in the least.
How do we as a country overcome that obstacle without giving leeway to China, Iran, and some of those other bad actors to take advantage of the situation?
Well, number one, there are young people and parents or influencers of young people who are turned off by the DEI and the wokeness. And whether it be the young person saying, I'm not going to join an organization like that, or the parents, the pastors, the coaches saying to the young men and women, you don't want to join the Navy because they're not focused on the right things when it comes to what they believe their mission is to recruit, retain, and grow their leadership at all levels, whether it be officer or enlisted. So the challenge that we have is to ensure that the Navy and the other services, but the Navy, I think, probably has the worst showing, is that they've taken their eye off the ball for too long and what it takes to develop a career capable force in these. When we say SWO, that stands for Surface Warfare Officer. They're doing fine with recruiting their pilots, except they take too long to train them. The pipeline needs to be tighter. They're doing okay in some of the other skills, whether it be cyber, some of the intel stuff. But let's face it, what's the Navy's job? It's to protect our assets, and our assets means our borders and our facilities around the world from harm by doing it on the water. So they're behind.
So normally, I know you're usually in the news focused very heavily on constituent services and keeping our nation safe. But lately, you've been in the news as a kind of a clarion call, I guess you might call it, or refer to it as, regarding Tim Walz and his service record. I've seen you on Newsmax. I've seen you in a few other places. Would you enlighten the Rally for the Republic audience about why you've decided to take this approach and what you're trying to do to help America understand?
Yeah, number one, here's a little known part of my bio too. For a couple of years, I was also a CWO2 in the Rhode Island Army Guard. So I know not only the Marine Corps, but I've worn the Army Guard unit and understand what it means to be in a National Guard, which is where Walz was. Don't embellish. It's one thing to embellish how good a golfer you are, because when you get on the course, people will know how you hit the ball if you really are a good golfer. But not everybody will know what Walz's true military service record was, and whether he forgot that he wasn't a command sergeant major, whether he forgot that he was in Italy, not Iraq, whether he, and I'm using this kind of tongue in cheek, when you're being considered for the second highest office in the land, you have to have impeccable integrity. And the only way you can maintain integrity is to never do anything that would cause people to question your integrity. In other words, did he tell the truth? And if he didn't tell the truth about his military service, and it's okay if he didn't go to the fight. The majority of people in uniform do not engage in kinetic combat. We are all, with rare exception,
Even if he carried the weapons of war?
well, that's what I was just about to go to. We are all, for the most part, issued we call it a TO, table of organization weapon. In some cases, as a pilot, my TO, was a pistol, okay, that I had on a shoulder, like I was kind of strapped on under my body armor. But we carried an M16 alongside in the cockpit just in case we needed it. But so it's okay to say you carried it, but the question is, were you in a unit where you were actually engaging in kinetic activity, which basically means shooting at the bad guys? And he just led people to believe that he was some, John Wayne kind of shoot 'em up, Clint Eastwood, whatever you want to call it. And we know that that's not who he was or what he did. So you denigrate the service of others who did by saying, you did it. And people don't like to be lied to. And again, being considered for vice president of the United States, that means he's one heartbeat away from the presidency should he become vice president. And it's a scary thought to think that that person would have such a lack of integrity when it came to such a simple thing as saying, hey, I served honorably. I made it to, E8. I was a master sergeant and I left. That would have been just fine, but he couldn't do that. So where else will he lie to the American people if he'll lie about the most basic of what he did in the service?
You are listening to Rally for the Republic. with your host, Bryan Rudnick.
So, on the topic of those who've served, you spend a great deal of your time, I know, working on veterans-related issues and causes. Is our nation living up to its promise?
It is. I'll just say this. It's the yes, but is it living up to it as well as it could or should be? I believe right now there's two elements here. Number one, the Veterans Administration has got some great people in it trying to do good things, but the reality is that the Veterans Administration has become too bureaucrat heavy, which hinders its ability to implement new programs for veterans, everything from the care in the community to get the providers so that veteran doesn't, in our case, doesn't have to drive 4 or 5 hours to a veterans hospital, a VA hospital, that they can get care in community or basic care at a CBOC, the local clinics. But at the same time, one of the challenges for the veterans themselves, and a lot of them, let's say, are a little bit older and not necessarily internet savvy, is they need to engage as best they can with the help of others. And this is all about now utilizing the internet and understanding what services the VA offers. So there's I guess ownership on both sides of that equation. The VA make it easier. The veterans get more engaged to figure out and not just expect somebody else to do it for you. Because most veterans I know, they want to do the right thing. Sometimes they're just not sure how. And especially as they age, it becomes harder.
What can the next administration or the next Congress do to help veterans more?
I think the next Congress is going to do a couple of things. Number one, they're still going to push the likes of the FDA and other research organizations to actually move forward with what we would call breakthrough research in different modalities, different therapies to help veterans deal with the issues they have. So that's the Congress pushing the administration, which in turn controls the bureaucracies and getting them to move forward with getting better results. Don't just say, well, we've been doing this program for 10 years. We like the way it works, but it may or may not be, hitting the mark as far as getting the outcomes for the veterans. So it's the focus. And also, as long as I'm in Congress, I will always be on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I'll always be on Armed Services Committee because I want to be part of that thread, if you will, from way on the front end, from the recruiting, the training, all the active component things that go into a person's service to when they transitioned from their service and enter the VA. For too long, it's been kind of like an abyss. You serve in the Department of Defense for, let's say, 8 years, and you get your DD-214 and you walk out the door and the Department of Defense says, have a great life. The VA is across the street over there somewhere. Go find them yourself. And the veteran just kind of falls into the abyss. We've been working literally for 20 years when I was still in uniform and now as a member of the VA committee to create some, if you will, bridges between the Department of Defense and the Veterans Administration. And a lot of that boils down to, since we do so much electronically now, whether it's electronic health records, whether it's personnel records that are consistent, complete, and secure, so that veteran navigating outside the DoD, trying to get into the Veterans Administration, has a clear pathway. And that's kind of what I'm focused on, and I'll be focused on that as long as I'm in Congress.
Wonderful. And I see you're trying to help get more conservative veterans elected to Congress through your Star PAC. Would you like to tell the public listeners about that?
Yeah, I created a leadership PAC, and many of the members of Congress have leadership PACs. This is not money that I use for my campaign. This is money that I raise through the legal ways to do that, because we never violate any ethics standards when it comes to what you can and cannot do with my time or money or whatever. But that money I use then to support, mentor, and enable more veterans around the country to become future members of Congress.
Who are some of the veterans you're helping this cycle?
Well,
Did I see?
yeah, we've got one, a guy like Tom Barrett here in Michigan, who's Army, was enlisted, went to flight school, helicopter pilot, served in the Michigan state legislature, ran last time, close race, but this time he's running in an open seat. I mean, he's won here in Michigan. A guy by the name of Joe Tayrab in Minnesota, great guy. He was a Marine JAG, Judge Advocate General, so attorney in civilian speak, and he's running in Minnesota. Those are a couple. Kelly Cooper down in Phoenix area of Arizona, another one. Those are three that come to mind right off the top. He just won the primary. I'm going Braden on a couple of names here.
Well, I see here online you're helping. Looks like John James and Ryan Zinke and quite a few other great patriots.
Yes, I'm helping some of those guys to get reelected. John James especially, and Ryan, as you mentioned. But I'm also focused out there on those newcomers that we're trying to get elected to grow our majority, our conservative majority.
So I guess you'll have a force at least to take on the Democrats who think you and the rest of us in the Republican Party are a threat to democracy.
Yeah, I'm always interested when they use that term, but I wonder what it means to be a threat to democracy when a party, in this case be the Democrats, just randomly throw out 14 million voter votes in primaries and decide, nah, they don't like their candidate for the president. They're just going to just disregard what those 14 million Democrat voters did and say, yeah, I think we'll choose somebody else. In this case, Harris. That's a threat to democracy.
The Maduro playbook, I think.
Well, there you go. And Stalin was a little similar, only a little more aggressive.
So what do you think? I like to ask every guest I have on here, what do you think is the greatest threat to our republic today?
I think the greatest threat, and I've said this long before politics, okay? What I'm about to answer to you is at least 15 years old. An apathetic society who expects someone else to do the hard work for them is the greatest threat to our democracy. And the reason I believe that is because my growing up with my parents who met and married during the Depression, my dad was in the South Pacific in the Navy in World War II, and they saw what an apathetic country in the 30s, to a large extent, we don't talk about that, was happening. And they believe that everybody should step up a little. So when they have to step up big, it's not a heavy haul. And so I believe the biggest threat to democracy is an apathetic. And then why are you apathetic? Do you just not care, or are you uneducated or uninformed? And let's face it, the leftists, not the liberals, the leftists know that the way to control people is to keep them ignorant and uninformed. So welcome to the playbook of the left.
What do you think we need to do to counter it, or how can we? I see you obviously are out in the district, and I see a lot of pictures of you online talking to young people. Yeah. How do you advise them?
Well, it starts two things. Number one, parents have to be parents. And believe me, that's a serious statement, because the sooner parents are parents, the sooner young children will develop a sense of priorities. And the education system is the responsibility of each state. It's not the federal government. And at each state, there's what's the phrase? Up until the third grade, you learn how to read. And then after the third grade, you read to learn. Too many states, Michigan being one, its public education system has suffered so badly under, and I'm going to lay right out here because I don't, if the shoe fits, wear it. The unions have basically almost demolished our K through 12 education system in our country. Certain states being more affected than others, Michigan being negatively affected. Oh, by the way, my youngest daughter is a career elementary teacher, so I could start quoting her, but she says, "Dad, just leave it alone." She doesn't want her name in the lights, but she believes that if a good young man or woman chooses to be a teacher, but for whatever reason can't make it in the classroom, because that happens, she believes that that person should be given a pink slip and say, wish them well, get on with life, not given an administrative job in that school district, because that administrative job now comes with a salary, and that competes for resources that she would normally have for her third grade classroom. So that's her view of how it should work. But again, education will lead to, I believe, a lower level of apathy, because people will have a sense of reality around them.
So as we wrap up this interview here in Rally for the Republic, I'd like to ask you just a couple more quick questions. Get your insights on. I know you're busy out there with constituents today, so I don't want to keep you, but I'd love to get your thoughts or your perspective on what it's like to be a member of Congress when a day like the attempted assassination occurred on President Trump and Butler. And, you know, do you get phone calls? Do you get an increase in security? Are you briefed right away? Could you give us a little insight into it?
Well, number one, let me put a little more meat on that bone for you. You know, I'd been in Congress 6 months when the guy tried to kill us all on the baseball field in June of 2017. I was right in the middle of that. So that was a wake-up call to a lot of people about the craziness of some of the deranged folks. And literally, it's on the left side. Sad to say, it is what it is. January 6th, we saw the fact that what happened in the Capitol is all on the back of Nancy Pelosi, for one simple reason. She had the authority to call up the forces necessary to surround the Capitol.
It looks like the generals had a little bit of a internet issue. Oh, he's back. Here we go.
Where did I leave off?
You were talking about Nancy Pelosi and her authority, which I think is going to almost reinforce something I've said previously on the show, but please continue,
Yeah, it fought, because if she would have deployed the forces that are trained to protect the Capitol, there would have been no rioters coming in. There would have been none of the stuff you saw. It would have been a demonstration around the Capitol, and that would have been the end of it. But it's all on her, because she made the call to not do it. Now, getting, as it says, to, how about on the, the attempted, assassination? Well, that committee is in full swing right now to determine exactly what happened, who had responsibility for, whatever, pre-speech assessment of the area and the coordination. Was it tightly put together? But it was I'm not going to say it was sad. It just kind of, quite honestly, made me mad to listen to the former director of the Secret Service kind of just arrogantly blow off the bipartisan questioning she was getting. That showed a sense of bureaucratic arrogance that we need to, as a member of Congress, by God, if you got a mission, you better do your mission or you're going to be gone. But we still have to uncover some of the things that we live in a dangerous world, and we just need to keep our wits about us. But we need a strong police presence in all the cities, because if there is not good, positive law enforcement, the bad guys will seek to control the cities. And unfortunately, what we've seen on the Democrat leadership side, they're willing to let Minneapolis burn. They're willing to let a lot of things happen in the name of mostly peaceful protests. Well, I'll just say baloney. We know it wasn't peaceful, and we know it was evil intent.
Well, Kamala Harris says if we don't man up our police forces, we can still be safe.
Well, my mother said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. But I'll just say she's clueless.
So you have a big agenda to help us save America, to save the Republic. What can people do to help keep you in office and keep you moving the direction forward for all of us?
The biggest thing they can do is exercise their right to vote. They may not be happy with some of the candidates, but I tell people on a daily basis, when our paths cross, if you don't vote, you dishonor the service of the men and women who fought for that right, and in some cases gave their lives for that right to vote. I'm never going to tell anyone who to vote for, but I'm certainly going to try to explain to them, from my perspective, the qualifications of the person running for that office and where they would be a good or a bad choice. But it's about people getting out to vote and everybody doing a little. Makes such a difference in life.
And I want to remind the Rally for the Republic listeners, if you want to help support General Bergman, you should go to his website, bergmanforcongress.com. Make sure you send him a donation. Make sure you stay informed on everything he's doing to save our republic. General, is there anything else you'd like to add and tell the listeners about today?
No, just thank you so much for the opportunity to, if you will, dialogue, even though it's been a one-way dialogue. I mean, I've been talking and hopefully the listeners have been listening, but if there's anything that you would like more clarification from me on, please reach out to my office. I'm easy to find because we represent not only our constituents in the 1st District, but people across the country who need help, especially when it comes to veterans issues.
Thank you, General Bergman. Appreciate you appearing on Rally for the Republic.
My pleasure, my honor. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us on Rally for the Republic, where we are fighting for America's future. Visit 1776coalition.com. Rally for the Republic podcast is available on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and download. Join Bryan Rudnick next time as we continue to fight for the American way of life and challenge the hypocrisy. This is Rally for the Republic.